to today's event, which is entitled How to Make Gender Equality a Reality. And it's good that I would like to tell you, but also those who couldn't join us today, that this event is recorded and it will be shared on the All Digital Week's website for all those who are interested in the content. I would like to say a few words about the All Digital Week's campaign, since this event is part of the All Digital Week's campaign, and actually one of the events during the 5th week of the last week of the campaign. The campaign itself is one of the major pan-European campaigns on raising awareness on digital skills for inclusion and empowerment. The campaign is organized by All Digital, and it's a network, member organization and partners, and it's been running since 2010. So since then, we have helped over 1.4 million Europeans to get online for the first time, to enhance their digital skills, really to fully exploiting the potentials of digital transformation. And the motto of this year's campaign is enhance your digital skills. And this is our call to action for all Europeans to benefit from digital transformation. And anyone can join the campaign by organizing an event, training program, on digital competencies, and putting your events or program on the All Digital Weeks alldigitalweeks.eu website. And this campaign is taking place online, but also in many physical locations, in digital competence centers, libraries, community centers, schools, and other venues across Europe. And every year we are reaching over 100,000 participants through our programs and our partners' activities. This year, the campaign is supported by institutional and corporate partners. The European Union is supporting the campaign, but we also have Certiport, Huawei, and Microsoft, who are our key supporters this year. And we have a number of strategic partner organizations, other European networks who help promote and disseminate the events during the campaign. Now every week, and this is the 5th week, we are focusing on a key topic around which we organize trainings and events at international and also national and local levels. And the 5th week of the campaign is focusing on improving STEM and STEAM skills for society, and very importantly, encouraging girls' and women's participation in STEM studies and careers. And that in this way, we are contributing also to raising awareness and the implementation of the Digital Education Action Plan and its particular action, number 13, which is targeting the same. You can see the list of events we are organizing this week. Yesterday, we had the launch event of the week. Today, we have the Equals EU webinar. Tomorrow, we'll talk about another project, the STEAM on Edu project, and we'll present the policy recommendations. And on Thursday, we are closing the 1 month long All Digital Weeks campaign. And now I would like to invite, first of all, my colleague, Andrea Bedorin, who is the campaign coordinator, and he's also involved in the Equals EU project, to present the project briefly and also to introduce the invited speakers. Thank you very much for your attention. And Andrea, the floor is yours. If you want, I can just stop sharing my screen at this moment.
Thank you, Peter. And if you can put on the slide once I present Tamara and Caroline. So basically, today we are here to discuss the Equals EU project, which is an Horizon 2020 project focusing on the Europeans' partnership for gender equality in the digital age. The Horizon project involves 19 partners from many different countries, 15 European countries, and also countries outside Europe, like Japan, Korea, Turkey, and Israel. And so it's quite big network for fostering gender equity and equality and tackling these big issues, the big issue that is at stake also for social, economical innovations purposes. The European Union has opened a call, the EU's Gender Equality Strategy 2020-2025, to engage and support women in particular, but also men to support this innovation and reduce the gap between the female and the male component of society. So the idea is to expand the opportunities for girls and women to participate in society in the political sense, in social sense, and also economical, including entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial opportunities. The Equals EU project, therefore, focuses on the promotion of gender equity in social innovation through a couple of different activities. There is the building capacity activity through partnership, and the number of partners involved in the consortium explains very well the contribution of the project towards this aim. And as well, the second objective is to create a smart, sustainable, and inclusive social innovation ecosystem that will be presented today during this event, and in particular in local communities and society, not only Europe, but as mentioned, also outside Europe. To do this, there are like different activities that have been envisaged, and there are innovations and hackathon camps, and we will have an hackathon, a social innovation event camp at the end of April, and then there are also webinars included as activities to promote social equity, like also the conversation we are having today, but also there are like learning programs and courses developed through the duration of the project. And the project is a 3 years project which started in January 2021 and will end at the end of 2023. And of course, there will be opportunities to increase entrepreneurial competencies and digital skills for women and girls involved in the project. And lastly, also there is the idea to create a new generation of innovators, including women in this, as so far there is a big gap between men and women in terms of innovation. And Tamara and Caroline will present the findings and the activities encompassing the project through the Work Package 1 and Work Package 4. And now I give the floor to Tamara. Actually, I introduced Tamara. Tamara Dancheva is working for GSMA Association. She's in the senior. She's a senior manager in international relationship, and she covers manifold activities to promote digital innovation and gender equity. She has a background on human rights and gender equality, and she is working to promote this through this really important aspects of life, human life, into society, and she will tell us now a bit more about the overview of the Equals EU project. Tamara, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for this introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you during this important week, not least ahead of International Girls in ICT Day, which you know, or I hope you know, is taking place on the 28th of April. Let me first start with a very brief introduction of what is Equals, because I'm sure that those of you who have joined us today for this event are wondering, okay, you know, what is Equals and Equals EU, and what does Equals stand for, right? So let me share a very brief overview of that before, of course, myself and Caroline dive into the work that we are all doing, of course, in the context of this project. So as Andrea explained from the beginning, of course, at the core of this joint effort that has brought all of these different organizations together, including, of course, GSMA is exchange of knowledge and transfer technology for equity, right? And bridging the gender gap in social innovation. I think, however, it's important to put this into a context. Why is this project being conducted under the umbrella of the Equals Global Partnership? And what is Equals? Equals was actually co-founded by GSMA in 2016, alongside UN Women, the International Trade Center, the International Telecommunications Union, where the Equals Secretariat sits, and UN Women, to bring the public and private sectors together to bridge the digital gender divide. I hope you agree that no single stakeholder can close this gap on its own. And this is exactly why the five of us came together to establish the Equals Global Partnership, which to this day remains as the largest network that brings, as you can see, international organizations, industry, governments, civil society, and of course, academia to mobilize change and really bring these two very unique, very different, yet very similar, of course, sectors to tackle the, sadly, the huge divide, digital gender divide, not least, that we are still facing. Now, since 2016, Equals has grown to over 100 members, and you will see in a second who some of those are. So it's a truly impressive network of partners. And as such, of course, it was only logical that we would undertake such an important work on a European level with the Equals EU project within the framework of Equals. Because at the end of the day, much like Equals, the Equals EU project brings two very different and unique sector representatives to tackle some of these really key issues. And you see, of course, from my slide, that Equals, of course, is closely aligned towards achieving the SDGs, gender equality being an obvious one, but also, of course, education, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, which, of course, fits within the framework of the Equals EU project, and, of course, partnership for the goals, which is SDG 17. Again, you'll see that we have a very ambitious goal of achieving digital gender equality by 2030, but we can all agree that much work remains to be done. Now, how does Equals bridge the digital gender divide? Well, it bridges it across four different key areas, which, as you can see, remain the four biggest gaps when we discuss these issues. So we have access, skills, leadership, and research. The Equals EU project falls very much within the leadership and research coalitions of Equals, because of course it aims to tackle the gender gap in social innovation, but with that, it also aims to tackle the gap in leadership. And that is why, as you can see, each of the Equals unique coalitions has a very unique goal, which of course is aligned with the current gap that we face across all four sectors. I mean, you see that, for example, access aims to reduce the gender gap in internet usage and access by 50%. Leadership, of course, to reduce the gap by 30%. Skills, 60%. And research, of course, underpins all of these activities, right? Because unless we have the data, we don't know what the issue is, and therefore we cannot tackle it. So all of these four different unique coalitions work together for a joint common cause, and that is, of course, to achieve gender equality in the digital age. Now, I have highlighted some of the key accomplishments of Equals to date since the establishment of the partnership in 2016. At the very bottom, you can see 4 very impressive studies that have been conducted to complement thought leadership and, of course, much needed data on some of these issues. And I'm happy to share the links later. But I want to highlight the perception of power study in particular, because that study, which is on championing female leadership in tech, is very much linked, of course, once again, to some of the issues that the Equals EU project tackles. And as I will later explain, it's also very much linked to the activities that GSMA is leading on within the framework of the project. You also see the Taking Stock report, which is the Equals research report, which draws data across access, skills, leadership, and research, of course, and kind of pictures the state of play on these issues and what can be done to address each of them. You see, of course, our advocacy efforts at the top right corner. I hope you recognize the ITU Secretary General and the former director, executive director of UN Women, who, of course, have equally helped us to really raise awareness of the issue. And of course, you also see the Equals sign, which they are showcasing, and that we are again hoping to become a household recognition, and also, of course, to publicize the work that Equals and we all do to advance these issues. So as you can see, a number of activities take place, from advocacy to research to, of course, direct engagement with international stakeholders. Now, I talked a lot about the partners. Who are those? Well, I've just picked a selection. I hope you agree that they are an impressive, of course, collection of stakeholders. At the top right corner, you see the German government. You recognized Ernst & Young, Nokia, Verizon. Of course, I mentioned the co-founders at the very top. We have, of course, UNICEF, World Bank, UNESCO, and so forth and so forth. So a really impressive group of stakeholders who are equally committed to supporting us. And of course, they're equally supporting and will continue to support the outcomes of the Equals EU project, even if they're not directly involved. But a little bit more on that later. And with that, I'll just pause there and hand over back to you, Andrea. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Tamara, for the overview on the project and for displaying the need for partnership and engagement with manifold actors of society, ranging from policymakers, companies, business, and of course, civic society and academia. And coming to the academic side, I would like to leave the floor in a second to Caroline Wamala-Larsson, who is an associate professor at Stockholm University. She is head of research at the Swedish program for ICT in developing regions, and in particular, and she works in the Department of Computer and System Science. So she's an expert in STEM and STEAM issues. And of course, she's also an expert, and she's very insightful on gender and technology issues and the relationship between digital solutions and gender. So I would like to leave the floor to Caroline, and she will drive us through the work package 1 on social innovation ecosystem of the Equals EU project.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Andrea. And this is a great way to continue from where Tamara left off, actually, because as part of the consortium, as the Equals EU, part of the Equals EU consortium, work package 1, of which Stockholm University leads, focuses on the research aspects, as Tamara also pointed out, because without the data, we don't know what the situation looks like right now. And if I just try and share my screen, give me a second. There we go. The title for work package 1, or what the work we're doing, is to essentially appraise gender equity and social innovation ecosystems. And I'll try to unpack this topic or this title shortly. in trying to explain exactly what it is we're trying to do, and how we try to work within the theme of what we're discussing here today with All Digital, that is hashtag gender equality, and how to make it a reality. And we need to, of course, understand that if we're all to contribute to our social and digital enterprises, we need to be allowed to do so. And one way to understand that is that everybody's idea matters. And if we're to allow those ideas to grow, if we're to support those ideas, diverse and wide and broad as they are, the environment is critical in ensuring that ideas are allowed to grow, and that we can all, no matter who we are, contribute to shaping our social and digital enterprises or futures. Because if somebody else is shaping, or shaping what your digital experience looks like, that can really impact how you relate to the digital or cyberspace. If somebody is shaping or transforming how you socialize, that will really have a great impact on how you position yourself in that society. So it is key that who we are as individuals are allowed to contribute to shaping both social and digital enterprises. And if we're to get there, let us first look at where we are right now. And this is where research is important. Where do we stand in as far as gender equity in innovation spaces is concerned? And as we ask that question, the Appraisal for Work Package 1 actually wants to understand that. Where are we in the situation right now? Andrea gave a great presentation of the consortium group that we form, that is equals EU. And as Work Package 1, we have relied on that consortium to help us study the situation in the 22 countries that are represented within this group of 19 members. And what the appraisal actually involves is to do a survey, a brief survey in the 22 countries to understand exactly where we are as far as innovations, that have a gender approach, inclusive approach, intersectional approach. We want to study how inclusive innovation processes are and what that leads to in terms of products and services that might come at the end of all of this. So in our appraisal, we're currently doing a survey with the support of all the consortium members. Of course, we can't do this without the support. And each country will collect 10 responses from 10 organizations that will seek to fill out the short survey on how they work with gender, how they define gender, and how inclusion, equality, equity are defined within the processes that involve innovation. Whether it is services, whether it is products, we want to see how we understand concepts or broad concepts or heavy concepts such as gender and equality. The survey is almost towards the end, but we still need more support, and I'll come back to this at the end. But some of the data we've analyzed has definitely highlighted gaps that we can hopefully fill up with focus groups, because what the focus groups will help us to do is understand some of the themes, some of the trends that have come up with the analysis for the surveys that we have collected, to try and see, okay, why is it that some of these products are not as effective as one would want? What was the thinking behind creating this particular product, for example? So the survey may be rather brief in terms of highlighting the innovations or highlighting the processes, but the focus groups will hopefully help flesh out these discussions so that we can write a more comprehensive report at the end of the day. And part of this appraisal will involve producing 22 country reports that will establish a clear baseline of where we are in terms of gender inclusive innovation processes. And this is just one aspect, but it will be exciting to actually have these reports on record that people can just go into and actually have a quick glance at what is happening in the 22 countries individually and collectively. And within Work Package 1, we have 4 deliverables or 4 reports to submit. We've already submitted the first 3. The first one outlines the methods. The second one talks about the networks that are involved in working towards this gender equality that we're discussing today. And the third report is talking about what type of innovations are the organizations listing or underlining when they respond to the survey. And so this has been really helpful for us to understand. So the last deliverable that we're supposed to submit, or the last report we're supposed to submit, involves the country reports, but also the data we'll get from the focus groups to help us fill in the gaps that we found with the survey of the 10 countries. If you want to read more about these reports, we've included a link here that you can click on to go and read more about the first 3 reports for those of you who might be interested. But perhaps you are wondering, just a second, what some of the results are that we have found. How do we work towards gender equality? How do we make gender equality a reality? And there's been a recurring mention of how important representation is. Representation is critical in terms of providing role models. And this is just a very broad title, but there's a lot that goes into the notion of representation. So role models is one, because if you see someone that looks like you being innovative, having an organization or leading a company that is developing inclusive products or inclusive services, then that idea sits well with understanding that if they can do it, so can I. Having mentors, people who will definitely mentor you along the journey, your innovation journey, is definitely critical in terms of providing that supportiveness that will get you to the product that is critical. And then I added ombudsman here, but that means that being able to go have a place or a structure that listens to you if you're struggling with something, or if you've experienced some sort of discrimination or marginalization, being able to go to this particular structure that will hear you and provide the support needed to get through this experience is also part or critical in terms of being able to feel like your ideas matter and that you feel represented. Another theme that kept popping up was the idea of sensitization workshops, what I've termed as training generally, but that involves advocacy, it involves workshops, seminars, and all manner of, bringing the idea of equality or gender equality or equity on the table where it is understood and actively, being engaged in the production of everyday life. So training was highlighted as critical. Policies are also kept coming up, where an environment that has legislature, strategies, plans in place that will support equal opportunities for men, women, and gender minorities, these are critical structures. They need to be in place. And as part of that, some of the organizations across the 22 countries, at least the ones that we have analyzed thus far, point to, for example, having structures such as in an organization to support young families with, flexible working environments where you're allowed to work from home, or you're allowed to, come in when it is possible, or you provide the supportive structures for lactating mothers to be able to continue their productive lives, both from the home as well as in their career or professionally. So policy is all about having that law, that legal framework, even within an organization, that ensures that no matter who you are, you have that legal support, that legal basis upon which you will be able to continue your productivity in the professional environment, regardless of where you are in your stage of life. And this is really helpful in terms of creating that necessary environment where we have a future that is gender equal in terms of production of innovations. I'm about to wrap up. I'm aware time is going. Some critical definitions, or maybe where is the support? In our D1.2 report, you will find a visualization of the type of networks. Tamara mentioned the importance of collaborating beyond our boundaries, beyond our borders. This is critical in terms of being able to work towards this gender equality reality that we're discussing today. And in the data that we have thus far, we have realized that there's a strong leaning towards more global partnerships in defining gender, in defining equality, equity, inclusion, innovations, and diversity. There seems to be a really strong leaning towards those global partnerships, more than we see within the countries themselves, because within the survey, we did ask what type of networks are you aligned with, affiliated with, that are supporting the work that you're doing. And there's a strong lean towards global partnerships. And one of the questions that comes out of this then is, does that mean that global initiatives are strong, or does the presence of global initiatives increase support for discussions around gender equality within national borders, within communities? This is something that we're still trying to tackle and understand, but I think it is evident just from this discussion alone that we cannot work towards this goal individually, or as Tamara said, no single entity can work towards this realization without the necessary partnerships that will support it. So the support seems to be more in the global partnerships, and the critical definitions are definitely driven, like the critical definitions here being gender equality, equity, inclusion, innovation, diversity, tend to be aligned within the global debate or global discourses. And gender is very contextual based on the results that we have thus far. That is that it is intelligible only when situated within the cultural context being analyzed. But there are indisputable similarities across contexts, such as ensuring that men and women are all, their ideas are valid no matter what stage in life they're at, and that they can also all be afforded, men, women, boys, girls, etc., are afforded the same opportunities when it comes to providing ideas and solutions to the world that we face today. Just some small snippets here, because there's extensive, yeah?
Sorry, we are running out of time. Sorry, yes. If you can wrap it up.
Let me wrap up. So you are welcome to read some of these definitions in report D1.3 with the link that I provided. Yeah, this is my last slide. But the survey clearly shows that we need to have a more global collaborative approach to realizing gender equality. And yeah, I welcome more discussions around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for the insightful presentation. It has been pretty complete, and I know you could speak for hours on this topic, but we need to pass to the next topic and see how technology also can be a support for innovation and to deliver gender equality. And I give the floor to Tamara so she can drive us through the work package 4 and the impact that technology has on gender equity.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you, Caroline, for the great overview of Work Package 1, which indeed brings us very nicely to what it is that we are doing as Work Package 4 and as GSMA, and how does that link to what Caroline and the overall project is trying to achieve. As I alluded at the beginning, what we are focusing on at the core is really exchanging knowledge and transferring technology for equity. But that in and of itself, of course, it's a very broad topic with a lot of keywords in here. So let me digest this a little bit. How do we aim to achieve this? As you can see, the work is structured around three very concrete and very unique activities. First and foremost, of course, we want to ensure that we are creating impact throughout the rest of the project and supporting the outcomes that are coming from the rest of the work packages. And as you can see, we do that by leveraging, of course, existing stakeholders and innovations, not least those who emerge from the mapping exercise that Caroline talked about, and of course, the very extensive survey and research that Work Package 1 has undertaken in that regard. Then, of course, we take this information, use it to develop new leaders and support rather the development of new leaders, which is the focus of Work Package 2, and then reinforce the equals in your network, which we are hoping to create under Work Package 3. Now, of course, at the core of all of these activities sits promotion of these best practices and knowledge, not least because you've seen, and you'll also see in a second from my slide, the very diverse network of stakeholders, both European and non-European. And last but not least, really support the development, future professional development of 24 leaders and advocates in gender equity and digital inclusion. And this is, in my view, by far the most exciting part of the project, because very often when we think of such projects, we always assume that there will be a lot of research involved, there will be a lot of data, but very little capacity building. This is quite the opposite. This project at its core, it's all about capacity building. And how can we empower directly the beneficiaries? And that is young women, of course, wanting to become leaders in innovation, certainly social innovation, but also tech. And with that, how do we support their startup endeavors and just overall ambitions and goals? And this is, of course, ultimately what each of us is trying to achieve through our respective work package work. Now, as I mentioned, GSMA leads on that work. And for those of you who are not familiar with what GSMA does, we represent the global mobile industry. And as such, we have roughly 700 mobile network operators from around the globe who are members at GSMA and 400 other members in our extended mobile ecosystem. So again, truly a representative body, of course, of the global mobile industry. And with that, we complement, as you can see, the rest of the work package for partners who mainly come from academia. And as you can see, again, a very diverse group, Ukraine, Switzerland, Latvia, Spain, Germany, Turkey, Israel, Macau, and of course, Belgium with all digital. Now, what are we hoping to achieve and how are we going to deliver on these objectives that we've seen? We have 4 key activities, some of which have already taken place. The first one was something that we already organized last year, and I will be sharing the outcomes of the meeting briefly, but the idea was to really host this colloquium of academia, industry, and civil society organizations, us to really focus on capacity building and educational cooperation in gender equity, and draw on concrete recommendations in that regard from different perspectives. And I'm happy to share that we actually had roughly 100 experts represented at the meeting last year. And as we look into the future, we are hoping to design 3 unique capacity building courses on women's digital rights, transformational leadership, and STEM skills, and take that and really create a mobility program for 24 future leaders, which will emerge from a series of hackathons and innovation camps taking place this year in each of the countries that you saw and each of the countries that are represented through the consortium members. And these activities will take place in a 3-week summer school next year, where the hackathon innovation camp winners will be invited to enroll and really take advantage of the capacity building courses I just mentioned, but also other extra curriculum activities that will help shape their leadership skills, and of course also support the startups that we are hoping each of them will come out as fully developed. And with that, as I said, I wanted to focus a little bit on the meeting we hosted on perception of power, and in particular, the recommendations that came from the 3 workshops that you see we hosted, with each really deep diving into very specific issues that we deem critical as we discuss championing female leadership in the digital age. Now, the goal of the overall discussion was not just to identify harmful gender stereotypes, which again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but also reflect on what are the day-to-day challenges when it comes to really moving the needle, and how do we identify key traits and skills needed to empower women in the digital age. Now, the first workshop, which was led by the colleagues from University of Haifa, really looked into the issue of strategic communication. One, I think that's often kind of maybe overlooked, but if you think about it, strategic communication underpins all efforts to promote gender equity, right? And unless you know how to strategically communicate, you can never achieve your objectives. And that's true, of course, in any field, not just here when we discuss gender equity and digital gender inclusion in particular. So some of the common themes that you see that emerged, and Caroline also, of course, mentioned those in the survey, and they were further reiterated by our experts here, is really the need to establish mentorship schemes and ensure that there is greater transparency around hiring processes, promotion criteria, and of course, reporting on wage gaps. The strategic communication case study or exercise was taken particularly in, let's say, in a corporate environment, so to speak. And this is why some of the recommendations emerged, because again, we know that, of course, it very often starts with how private sector conducts itself and how it fosters female leaders, right? Because then, of course, it trickles down subsequently. And here, again, we identified critically the need for transformational female leadership traits, and in particular, fostering those traits within the organization. And last but not least, of course, we also concluded that we really need to ensure that, and again, a message that you've often heard, we get the men on board, right? This is not a woman's issue, and therefore any, let's say, mentoring scheme in place needs to ensure that we are also taking into account the role and contributions that male leaders play and can contribute, because again, unless we do that, we can't really solve the issue, because it's not a one-sided discussion or a one-sided equation, so to speak. With the second workshop in particular, we looked into women's digital rights in healthcare. Now, I hope you agree with me that with the pandemic and the consequences that we saw for women in particular as more vulnerable compared to men, we really saw the need, right, for larger access and usage to digital technologies, because very often that proved to be a lifeline. I mean, in the case of GSMA, we have plenty of research that showcases how access to a mobile phone was and still is a lifeline for a lot of women and a lot of underprivileged and underrepresented groups, because of course it was the matter of staying connected and therefore having an income and being able to communicate or not, and being completely excluded from the digital economy. So similarly, with this workshop, the colleagues from University Hospital Cologne looked into this issue and identified 3 key criteria. Because we know that, again, as in any field, unless you involve, of course, women, which are half of the, of course, population, you are unable to really obtain this, reflect right on women's needs when it comes to healthcare, and therefore take those needs into account. Especially when, of course, we also discuss e-healthcare and telemedicine, which again really rose to the front during the pandemic, because very often this was the only way to receive any healthcare support and advice. So therefore, as you see, the first recommendation was really to facilitate access for people from underprivileged backgrounds to these services, because very often those are the ones that stay behind. And unfortunately, this is also women and girls. The second recommendation, which is critical, and again, also Caroline alluded previously to the need for global cooperation. Well, this is also the case for global digital health. So we need to improve the global digital health governance, right, by investing in digital health literacy, and of course, ethical and gender development, because there is a lot here also to be said about how we need to ensure the data privacy, how do we guard sensitive information, including medical records, etc. Topics, of course, that we cannot address on today's meeting due to a lack of time, but again, I'll share the link to the full report. And last but not least, a critical recommendation that we drew upon was really supporting mechanisms for innovation development in real-time policy reforms by allowing this dialogue between citizens and governments, right? Because again, we need to link the two, and the two cannot be seen as disconnected. And at the end of the day, citizens are there to elect their governments, and governments are there to serve them. So again, how do we make this link and ensure that this is also the case when we discuss gender equity in healthcare? And last but not least, the third workshop led by the colleagues from Middle East Technical University in Turkey looked into leveraging STI skills for gender equity. Now, again, I'm sure that some of these recommendations are not new or groundbreaking, but again, it's worth reiterating them, and it's worth remembering that if we're still discussing them, we still have not achieved them, right? So as I hope number one is not a surprise to many of you, we need to ensure that ICT studies are actually an obligatory part of the education process, because we know that very often this is still seen as a area dominated by boys, and therefore it's really not an arena that young girls should get engaged in. And that is certainly not the case, right? So the only way to change this perception is to ensure that STEM studies are introduced as part of any obligatory, certainly secondary and tertiary education. Secondly, again, we spoke a lot about this, and again, this is the whole point of the Equals EU project and the Equals Global Partnership. We need to foster closer collaboration between public and private sectors and increase awareness about the role of women in tech and the ICT sector overall, and therefore increase the number of women who pursue STEM studies. And last but not least, we need to connect emerging leaders, female leaders, with those who are already established, because we know that unless we have role models, and again, Caroline referred to her as well as a recurring theme from the surveys, we can't move the needle, because unless you see it, you cannot be it, right? So we need these female role models, and we need to ensure that we are connecting emerging young female leaders with those who are already established. And again, this is very much at the core of the summer school, which we are hosting next year, and at the core of all of these capacity building programs we are allowing for our participants. And I think I'm out of time. So with that, I would like to thank you. And of course, I welcome questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Tamara, for the overview on the work package 4 and all the activities that you are conducting. And they are really relevant. Like I noticed, the digital rights in healthcare is a topic and an issue that involves everybody, not only men, but also families, children. And so I think it's very timely to have this discussion. And of course, at All Digital, we are really aware of the issue on ICT and gender gap, and we have also other projects covering this topic. But now I would like to give the floor again to Caroline, as there is a call to action for our initiative, and especially for the survey that is really, really important, as data is the basis to understand what actions have to be carried out in the future. So please, Caroline, if you can tell us more.
Thank you so much for this platform, Andrea, and for me to be able to reach out to so many of you. I really thank All Digital for the support in this current activity. As I mentioned in one of the slides, we have to provide data from 22 countries. 15 of them are from the European Union, or Europe for that matter, and others are from outside of Europe. Right now, we are at a stage where we have 17 complete countries, and we still need to complete 5 countries. So any support you can provide, if you happen to be from Belgium, from Croatia, from the Czech Republic, Malta, Italy, or Romania, please support us in filling in the survey so that we can reach the 22 countries that we need. You need not be at the intersection of gender and innovations. You just need to be an organization that is working in some way, shape, or form. And what we want to establish from you is if you actually have innovative ways in which to work with a gender inclusive approach when it comes to innovations. So we do actually have the first question asks what type of organization you are. And hence that means that we're not restricting you to being a tech startup or an innovation organization. We just want to hear from you how you work with gender inclusion or gender equality innovatively in trying to create a gender equal society. So those are the countries: Belgium, Italy, Romania, Croatia, Malta, and the Czech Republic. Any support from any of those would really be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for the call to action, and I hope the network will support Equals EU project, and in particular Work Package 1 initiative to collect data that are crucial to understand the next actions, also supporting the other work packages. So I now would like to check if there are any questions on the chat for our speakers.
There is a question, at the same time an offer from Eva Fabri. She asked to confirm the missing countries, as she's referring to have national contact points in 30 countries, and offering her support.
Okay, I think Caroline already went through the countries, which are Belgium, Croatia, Czech Republic, Malta, Italy, and Romania. But yes, I think Caroline will contact Eva after this call, this webinar, to try to engage with national contact points that Eva suggested that are in our network. And I don't know if there are any other questions. I didn't see the chat properly. I actually have one question that, I mean, it comes to my mind, and I would like to ask Caroline and Tamara from their experience in terms of male leaders, as male leadership can be somehow an obstacle if it's not illuminated, if let's say in that sense, if they don't like those leaders don't really see the value of gender equality to enhance the evolution of society. So I don't know if you have any idea or from your experience how to improve this situation.
Thank you, Andrea. Are you referring to sometimes the lack of, let's say, buy-in when it comes to, promoting such objectives at the top? Do I understand the question correctly?
Yes, is to promote like gender equity also in male leaders that sometimes might not really see it as a problem. So I mean, how can this be enhanced, and maybe how can we make them aware that it's important to have inclusivity in that sense, and in particular in tech environment where there is a wide majority of male representatives?
Yeah, no, good question, Andrea. I mean, of course, it's it's always best when you have buy-in at the top, right? And I mean, I'm using GSMA as an example because we have a lot of ongoing initiatives on diversity and equity and inclusion, because our Director General, Mats Granvik, is extremely committed to this topic, right? And therefore, he's driving not just external efforts on behalf of GSMA to play such a critical role, but also internally, right? When it comes to ensuring internal efforts as a company. And to answer your question, I think, of course, as I said, in an ideal world, this is what needs to happen. But don't forget that there are many other steps that can be taken before then, right? So first and foremost, if you speak about private sector, and of course I have my private sector lenses now on, you need to position this as a business case. I mean, there have been a multitude of studies done in terms of the added value for business as soon as you diversify your workforce, right? Because it's not just about the right thing to do. It's about the profitable thing to do, right? It's about making sure your business is successful. Because at the end of the day, if you're not diverse, you cannot be successful, because then you're not appealing to diverse customers, because you're lacking that diverse perspective internally as a company, right? So of course you need to also start with that. And then, it's important that you have diversity and inclusivity champions inside the company. So, how many of you are speaking up on this issue, right? And is it being, let's say, is it something that is kept a little bit, let's say, in a silo, or is it something that you're actively trying to promote as a cross-cutting topic? Because if you constantly marginalize it and you insist that this is, let's say, something that doesn't affect every other business operation, then of course change will never come. And that is the whole point, making sure that you also appoint such champions, and you kind of showcase, particularly vis-a-vis leadership, how this is a cross-cutting topic, right? And how it impacts on every other single aspect of the business when it comes to operations.
Thank you, Tamara. So I see that for the business sector, it's important to, let's say, link diversity with the innovation and profitability. And so values and also money in a way. Let's say, I understand. And for Caroline, is as academia is on the public side. How would you see this point as there are like many leaders? I mean, most of rectors and vice rectors in academia are male. I think around 85% in Europe. How do you think that could be tackled? If there is any different way?
I think it's imperative. One of the first statements that I made was that all ideas matter. And so giving a space and allowing people to express themselves regardless of who they are is imperative for this, goal of a gender equal, future. So it's important to definitely have or invite male allies from the start, whether they're the leaders or whatever. They need to understand that they occupy a position of authority, and having that position of authority, what does that mean in terms of fostering a future or a generation that will be able to continue the work that is being done? So in terms of encouraging from an academic perspective, it's imperative to understand that what we do is we're very reflexive as well. We reflect on our positions. We reflect on who we are. We reflect on all that has shaped and contributed to where we find ourselves today. And knowing the positions of privilege that many of us occupy is critical to how we might want to relate to others. This can be said of male leadership, or who may even take on the position of male allies when it comes to more equal or more gender inclusive spaces, that they recognize that they cannot and should not speak for the marginalized communities. They should allow those voices to be heard so that they can understand this is the perspective from which they're speaking, because I cannot attempt to speak from any other point of view than the one that I occupy. And so I, for example, have to be sensitive to the fact that my experiences have been shaped by, the life that I have led. My social experiences have shaped who I am, and they have therefore also shaped my boss, who may be a man, but he needs to also recognize that he cannot speak for the position that I occupy. I cannot speak for anybody else but for myself. And it is therefore imperative that from an academic perspective, we take that point, that methodological perspective, and reflect on our positions, and we allow the fact that everyone's idea is valid, and we should allow them or hear their voices and provide a safe space in which these ideas are allowed to grow.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Tamara. Let me check the chat. And yes, I don't think there are any other questions. I would like to thank you so much for your presentation and to have presented different cases from academia, from research, innovation standpoint, and business cases, and as well all the work done in Equal CU. And I ask everybody to turn on the camera, and thank you, Victoria, for reminding me. So for anybody who would like to be in the picture, we have this habit to take a group photo and then share it on the project page sometimes. So please
All right.
turn on the camera.
Yes, we'll allow it a few more seconds. It's great to see that some people are networking in the chat. This is happy. That's what we have this campaign, and it's good to see you, Eva, and in person. Nice to meet you. And we've exchanged some emails last week. All right, I think we're all here. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will take a screenshot in 3, 2, 1. Cheers. Let me check if everything is all right. Yes, very good. Again, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you very much, Tamara. Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you very much to everyone for being with us today. And we keep in touch. We will forward you all the information after the event. And if you have any questions, you can contact All Digital for anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.